that your safety is completely jeopardized and they could really put you at risk of even losing your life. It goes back to a sense of honor and purity, and women, for whatever reason, just carry the burden for that.
Hi, I'm Flora, and today I'm with Miss Mary David, the Communication Director at Journey Out.
Welcome to Journey Out. We're excited to share our space with you and talk to you about human trafficking.
Coming! Hi everyone, I'm Flora, and today I'm very honored to have Miss Mary David from Journey Out with us today. And Mary herself is a prosecutor of over 2,000 cases and recognized as one of the top foreign policy leaders under the age of 33. Can you tell us more about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for doing this interview. I have been working in the anti-trafficking movement for over 10 years now. For me, it started with a study abroad program back in Cyprus and doing some advocacy there, and I published a paper about how different organizations can help address anti-trafficking internationally. And from there, I actually went to the governor's office in Maryland and helped to draft some of Maryland's first laws on trafficking.
Wow, that's really impressive.
Thank you.
Can you tell us more about your involvement in Journey Out?
Absolutely. I am the Director of Communications here at Journey Out, and in that role I help to oversee any of the outward-facing media and communications that we have with the public. That includes all of our social media, that includes newsletters, the blog, the website, and also just engaging the public and engaging in outreach. Another very rewarding part of my job at Journey Out is assisting with prevention programming. And through that, I have the pleasure of working with the most amazing students, such as yourself, on creating content specifically for teens, created by teens, helping them empower other teens so that they can prevent teens from being exploited.
So from your experiences working to fight human trafficking, what do you think is the biggest misconception people have about human trafficking?
There are a lot of misconceptions. I think one that we hear all the time is that this is only a problem that happens with people overseas and it's not a problem here in the United States. It's actually a huge problem here in the United States. In California, actually, in particular, California has the highest number of cases of human trafficking out of any other state in the U.S. reported to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And people always think that if it is happening in the U.S., that it's happening with people from other countries who are brought to the United States, but actually teens and young adults and even people who are older than that can be trafficked and are trafficked from city to city.
So what are some tactics that traffickers use to find victims?
One tactic that traffickers will use is trying to entice any victims through social media. They will target youth who post anything related to being sad or not having friends or feeling lonely, depressed. If they say things like, I'm so ugly, I don't have any friends, traffickers will actually search for posts that have things like that, and they'll start liking all of those posts by a specific person. They'll start friending everyone on that person's list or following them so that they try to build a relationship with them, even though this victim doesn't have any idea who they're really talking to. Traffickers will also pretend to be agents for any opportunities in theater or dance or the entertainment industry and act as if they can help someone get into those industries by modeling for them or being part of a music video, but really they are just using that to entice the person and gain their trust. They also target youth at malls, for example, and they will, one tactic traffickers use is actually going up to someone who they think is a potential target, and they'll tell them, you are beautiful. and see how they respond. If the person responds with a lot of confidence and seems really sure of themselves, the trafficker moves on. But if the person seems really unsure of themselves and says, no, I'm not, and just looks down at the floor and just seems uncomfortable with getting a compliment, then the trafficker continues to try and build a relationship with them because they say, oh, this is someone who I can manipulate because they have low self-esteem.
And something just to note is these are not the only tactics that traffickers use. Traffickers also target college students who have interest in dance, modeling, career. So don't think that traffickers only use the ones that Mary mentioned to us.
That's a really good point, Flora. Another point that relates to that is that traffickers will actually use other victims to recruit for them. They wouldn't necessarily trust this stranger who's a lot older than them, who pretends to be this business owner, but if they come across someone either at school or at a club or at an off-campus party, especially if they're a college student, for example, and that person just has the best hair, makeup, accessories, and says, oh, well, the reason I have all of these nice things is because of my manager, and I'm a really successful model thanks to him, or I'm a really successful actress. You should meet him, or you should meet her. She's a great agent. Then it's a lot more likely that the potential victim would trust this person because they've now been vetted by someone who they see as a peer.
So a trafficker could really be anyone. It could be your friend's friend, your family relative, or someone your friend tell you to meet. Well, I actually had a conversation with the executive director of Journey Out here, and she mentioned to me that the cultural stigma of many victims coming from an Asian cultural background had deeply influenced them. Many of them refused to open up due to the fact that anything associated with commercial sex act is considered dishonor in the Asian culture. Have you personally worked with, met any of the victims coming from an Asian background?
Yes, actually the first victims I ever met were Sri Lankan and Filipino domestic workers. They were actually labor trafficking victims, but they were also being sexually exploited at the same time. And that's something else that people often think that the distinction between labor and sex trafficking is a really finite one, but a lot of times there can be gray where labor trafficking and sex trafficking kind of merge together. But with those victims that I met, they were of an Asian background, and there is culturally a lot of stigma and shame coming around the idea of any sort of sexual exploitation that happens in the Asian culture, a lot of times because it goes back to a sense of honor and purity and just a sense that this is representative of the family. And women, for whatever reason, just carry the burden for that. So if a woman engages in any sort of sex act outside of marriage, it's seen as dishonoring her family. And this stigma, even if it's in a situation of rape or exploitation, still persists. It's so hard because of that for them to even tell their family members what they're going through. And traffickers will actually use that to keep them enmeshed in the cycle of exploitation, because they will tell the victims, I will expose you to your whole family. I will send them the photos of you. I will bring so much shame upon your family. And that threat alone is enough to keep a lot of victims from coming forward.
So it's a psychological trap that the trafficker uses on the victims.
Absolutely.
Going into the ways we can defend ourselves against human trafficking. What should we do when we confront a person that we suspect to be a trafficker?
The most important thing to do if you encounter a trafficker directly is to get to a safe place. And they will do anything in their power to gain control of their product, which is you. It means that your safety is completely jeopardized, and they could really put you at risk of even losing your life. So the first thing you want to do is try and get away from them as quickly as possible and report this to law enforcement. The number to do that, it's 1-888-3737-888. That number will actually direct you to local law enforcement who can handle the case directly, and they have specialized information and background and training to be able to assist you.
That's very helpful to know. And my question is, when we confront a victim, but that person might not self-identify as victim due to maybe brainwashing or the psychological traps that trafficker place on them, should we still report to the law enforcement or any authority?
That's a really good question, Flora. It's so difficult to know how to navigate this when the person themselves isn't ready to get help. But if you do suspect anything, you definitely should tell an adult. It's really important to get your friend or whoever the person that you're in touch with is surrounded by some resources to help them. And it's really important that they know that you are not going to judge them. That the shame that they might fear from either cultural stigma or just their own sense of lacking in self-worth or shame or regret, that's not something that you believe they should have, and that's not something that you are putting on them either. So in those situations, you want to reassure them that you are there for them, that you support them, and that they can always talk to you. At the same time, though, it never hurts to report things to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, because at the end of the day, even if there's not a ton of information or evidence, it at least puts something on the radar, and that's always what you want to do just to be safe.
So, no matter if you confront a person you suspect to be the victim or trafficker, you should always report to the law enforcement or any authority. And the last question is, how are the ways that me or anyone in the community can help fight human trafficking?
Oh, there are so many ways. I'm glad you asked. The ways to fight human trafficking are as varied as your interests. It really depends on what you want to do. We need advocates in so many areas, from creating any social media posts, creating content anytime that you post about a potential situation or you share content that's on an anti-trafficking website like Journey Out, and make that conversation just a part of the dialogue you have with the people around you, you're helping increase awareness about the issue. You can host a movie night where you watch a film that's related to human trafficking, or start a book club where you discuss a book about slavery with your peers. That's a great way to use the arts to engage the topic. And you can also create anything you want that touches on this issue, whether it be creating a movie, a song, poetry. Maybe it's a dance performance that highlights some of the different ways of manipulation that traffickers use to entice victims.
So awareness is a really important part of fighting human trafficking. Many people think that they already know much about human trafficking, but the community around you might still know nothing about it. So if you learned something through this interview, or you found out about human trafficking online, the best way to fight human trafficking is really to reach out to those around you and educate them about human trafficking. Is there anything else you want to add on or let us know in this interview?
Just that you should definitely check out Journey Out online. You can find us at www.journeyout.org, and our social media handle is @JourneyOutLA.
Thank you so much for doing this interview with us and sharing with us everything on human trafficking. We really appreciate you being here. And just some last information, the human trafficking hotline, let me say this again, is 888-3737-888. So if you need help or seek information, you should, the door Journey Out is always open, and you can always call the hotline. Until next time.
3, 2, 1.
What happened on 3, 2, 1?
That's cool.
Hello. So what are we doing? We're posing?
Just random thing. I don't know.
definitely behind the scenes, like literally behind
Behind the scenes.
behind the scenes.
Okay, bye.